the first element of trust is that everybody feels that there's transparency. And there are obviously conversations that have to take place in a certain way, and there are some things that are just inappropriate to blurt out. But we basically know those. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being protective of information or feeling like you have to create your image with your board in order to leave the other board members feeling confident. The confidence comes from ultimately, by the way, all of the confidence comes from the performance of the company. You can be the best showman in the boardroom, but in fact, over time, if you're not producing results, it doesn't matter. And the converse can be true. You can be a little kind of maybe timid in the boardroom for whatever reason, maybe it's your personality, but you are, you're getting results. That's where the confidence comes from. The other place where the confidence comes from is when your board members see that you're running an efficient meeting. Because their time's valuable, they know your time's valuable, they know the company's invested in this meeting. And so when they see you come in, you're actually the structure of the meeting, and the way the meeting is run, and the way the people are giving a chance, each person's having a chance to talk, the CEO's not doing too much talking, progress is being made. That is another way that a CEO can instill confidence with their board. But I guess I reject the notion itself that you're supposed to create confidence or project confidence. What you're really supposed to do is add shareholder value and run the company well and run the board meeting well. The rest will follow. If you leave those board meetings consistently prepared to do something different because you learned something from the board meeting, that's a mark of a good board. If and plenty of CEOs are this way. They think a good board meeting is when they leave and nobody got mad at each other and they accepted all their proposals. I don't feel that's the case, because then the board just became compliance. So the first step is diagnosing, do I in fact have a good board or not? And I guess my point is that some people's definition of a good board is actually the opposite of what I think is a good, well-functioning board. But let's assume you don't feel like you have a good functioning board. Then you have a question about, is it the people or is it the process? If it's the people, that's a tough fix, because you are going to have to turn over people on the board. If it's the process, then I think the easiest advice is to seek someone either on your board or outside your board and say, it's not working. I mean, I get these really smart people and we all get along and we show up on time, but every time I leave the board meeting, I just don't feel like I got any value out of it. And then you diagnose, well, how do you run your meetings and what materials do you send out, and let me see materials. And usually someone who's got some experience will be able to diagnose it and say, here's your problems. And if you fix these things, you'll fix your process. With a public company, there's a lot of regulations and rules around what you can and can't do, what you should do. There's things that have to take place in board meeting. Largely, all of those don't exist in a small private company. Secondly, in a large public company, the board members tend to not be significant shareholders. They may own just tiny percents. So if you can imagine, let's say the board of Disney, although you might have a few old family members from the Disney family, most of those shares are spread among funds and other individual investors. But with a small company, oftentimes the entire ownership group is in the room, or let's say 80% of the ownership in the room. So you start with different demographics. Secondly, generally the CEO is at a different stage in their growth. So if it's a mature company, you're looking at how do we grow 5% a year, or how do we make these little moves. But with a small or medium-sized company, you're trying to move in leaps, and that requires more of a mentorship role from the board. And you tend to get more into operating details, and those are some of the kinds of differences. But there aren't the guidelines or the framework that exist with public companies and private companies. So what oftentimes happens, and I think it's a failure of small boards, is that people kind of wing it, and the CEO wings it in terms of what she or he writes in the board material, and then the board members kind of show up and they're not quite sure, well, where's the line between helping them with operations and then I'm actually starting to supplant management as opposed to supporting management. So those roles are generally not as clear as they might be in a larger company. Norms. that are clear in a public company are not necessarily clear in a private company. I'll give you an example. There are attendance rules with public companies that are defined. There are no attendance rules that are defined in a small or medium-sized company. Traditionally, a nonprofit board is a collection of your large donors or people who can have access to large donors and bring in money. So it's really a development board. I think the world is moving, and the nonprofit boards are moving more in the direction of the for-profit boards, which is that we want operational strategic help. But in order to do that, it can't just be the people who write the big checks. It has to be people who understand operating issues and understand the difference between the operating issues of a nonprofit versus a for-profit. So the problems that are occurring, which I think over time will get fixed, is we have our largest donors, but they don't know how to run businesses because of where their money came from, but they were excellent as fundraisers. The next is we have a wave of people who are coming in saying, we're going to run nonprofits like for-profits, but the problem is they don't run the same because the metrics of success aren't the same. In a for-profit, it's simple. Over time, more cash has to come in than go out. It's that simple. Nonprofit is different. They're mission-driven. And I like to think about the two as in a for-profit, your goal is to make money. The mission drives that. So the mission drives the financials. Nonprofit's exactly the opposite. The financials drive the mission, and you need board members that understand that. I think really the best boards are the ones where the CEO has the confidence in themselves and in their direction that they're free to talk about the things that are worrying them, that are troubling them, to say, I have this issue here that is keeping me awake at night, and I have to be honest with you, I really don't know which direction to go, and I'm hoping to take advantage of the 5 of us being in the room to give me some advice on what I should do here. That's a confident CEO. A CEO that lacks confidence is one that wants to protect themselves and lead and create an image that they have all the answers, but of course they don't have all the answers. And by the way, they're fooling no one because the board members know that nobody has all the answers.